Thanks for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio. This podcast was recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists in 2024 and 2025. In this episode, NCCAkron's Executive Artistic Director, Christy Bolingbroke, enters the studio with Valley Cottage, New York-based Art Bridgman and Myrna Packer, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based Raphael Xavier, and Miami, Florida-based Hanna Ali and technical collaborators.
All right. Thank you all for coming out on this drizzly April evening. It's wonderful to be here with you, and we appreciate you showing up for dance. I'm Christy Bolingbroke, the Executive Artistic Director for the National Center for Choreography here in Akron. This live edition of Inside the Dancer's Studio provides a unique moment for us. Through one of NCCAkron's dancing labs, we've been on a journey for the last 6 months exploring immersive spaces. You've likely seen promotions for things like the immersive Van Gogh exhibit or an immersive Disney happening. Well, we asked ourselves and tonight's speaking artists, are these platforms somewhere where dance and live performance could also be shared? To explore this question, we traveled to Miami and Houston, visiting immersive spaces in concert halls like the New World Center for the Arts, museum galleries like Super Blue, and social venues like Meow Wolf. We realized that immersive means many different things. It can be multi-sensory, evoke feelings, cause confusion, invite interaction, center the audience as performer or user, and only sometimes is truly engaging. It is with that expansive idea in mind that we invite you to think about dance and technology. This feels particularly relevant when we consider how quickly technology advances compared to the time and body-based performing arts. It makes us ask, what is dance's relationship to this ubiquitous term, technology? And whether the human body outlasts these digital tools that may become outdated. As part of this very special live edition of Inside the Dancer's Studio, we've invited artist teams, including lead artists and their technological collaborators, to give you just a taste of their work, their artistic point of view, and how they utilize technology in the creative process. I'll give you a heads up. This conversation is a precursor to a screening of the Loie Fuller film, Obsessed with Light. And so what you'll see in the Fuller film involves experiments with technology from over 100 years prior. So technology doesn't always mean new, but it is an ongoing practice and habit of innovation and to selectively and creatively apply those skills. Ultimately, what we always try to put in the foreground at NCCAkron is creative decision-making. Please join me in a round of applause for our speakers. Great. I'd like to invite Bridgman Packer to come up and introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Myrna Packer.
Art Bridgman.
Peter Bobrow.
We're Bridgman Packer Dance. Art and I collaborate in our choreography and our performance. And about 20 years ago, we brought Peter into our collaboration in about 7-8 major works over the last 20 years. So our work integrates live performance and video technology. Often the video is of ourselves, often life-size, which allows us to multiply on stage, allows me to dance not only with him live, but his video image, my own image. Sometimes there are 20 of us on stage, 2 are live, the rest are virtual, depending on the theme of the work that we create. We do on-location shoots. Those images are projected, and we're also moving in and through those locations.
The question is a little bit chicken and egg. Which comes first, the dance or the technology? How and when do you use it as a tool or a collaborator?
This probably requires a little bit of history of how we first started working with video technology, because we had already been creating and performing our dance works for quite a while, and they often had a theatrical element. We're very interested in saying something on stage about the human experience. And in 2001, which is just around the time when consumer level cameras and projectors were available and affordable, we obtained one of each. Art went out to our studio late at night, which is behind where we live in the Hudson Valley, and he filmed himself and he projected himself life-size. He called me and said, come out and look at this. And he projected himself, he stepped into his image and was moving in and out of that image. And I saw this metaphor immediately of somebody fracturing off of himself, of showing different sides of himself. And I also saw visually the question of what is real and what is image. And that was so moving to me that I let go of my resistance to technology, because I saw what it could say for us on stage. So that night led into the creation of a work called Seductive Reasoning. And it was at that time that we invited Peter into the process. And that seed of questioning what is image and what is real, and allowing the video to be a metaphor for what we want to say, has continued to build in each piece. The technology's gotten more and more complicated, but our goal is always that it helps us say what we want to say, that it's not technology for its own sake, because it can be very seductive and turn into tricks and gimmicks. And essential for us is that it's integrated with the live performance, and that it is saying something about the human experience.
So it's not just for the purpose of spectacle, that there's an intention.
There's definitely spectacle in what we do, but yes, it is extremely intentional. So within each piece, when the video enters and when the dance actual movements are created, it's pretty simultaneous.
There's really no single way in which each dance is done. They're all done differently in terms of when we introduce the technology, but it comes in pretty early in the process, because we really want to enter the technology. We want to be a part of it. We want the projections to be around us as opposed to behind us or above us. We really are looking for different ways in which we can enter the scenes and the backgrounds, if you want to call them that, in each piece. And so, for instance, we often will project on a white scrim where we can be seen behind a white scrim is like a see-through piece of fabric where you can see people in front of it and behind it. And when we're behind the scrim and we're lit, it looks like we are right in the projection. So we keep on pushing the idea of how are we going to use the technology, and to what extent is this technology part of our artistic palette? What is it we want to say? How do we want to incorporate it for this next dance, and then explore that? And we never know where we're going to end up, but we know that we know we're going to end up in a new place each time.
Yeah, I want to hear if Peter gets to enter the dance too.
Oh, it's happened on occasion, sure. The thing that I always like to kind of phrase it as, we're on this search for visual phenomena, these moments when something happens that brings the performance and the technology and the projections or whatever particular technique we're using into a particular constellation that just does something that's more than the sum of its parts. And it's a momentary experience of something like, oh, there's something there. We spend a lot of time exploring dead ends or iterating through all sorts of possible ways to combine video images with people with life size, with other sizes, with live cameras, with cameras on time delays, with green screen, with like anything you can name. We go and we play with it, and we're like, what can we do with this that brings a moment together, and that creates this visual phenomenon for a moment that somehow speaks to us. And then if there's a spark there, we go explore that and stretch that out and iterate through it, and out of that process land on the things that move us, which are in many ways independent of the technology themselves. It's more about the visceral experience of, seeing a moment. And often a lot of our pieces come to a place where it's really hard to tell who's live and who's a video, right? Like that's something that speaks, I think, to the core of what we strive for, which is this melding of the two. And there are plenty where it's really obvious what's the video and what isn't, but it's out there, right? And that's kind of what we're doing as a process.
I think we go from some moments where we're being intentionally ambiguous and you can't tell, and moments where the contrast is interesting between the three-dimensional, visceral, flesh and blood body and that ephemeral, made of light projection. If you want to see examples of what we're talking about, go to our website, bridgmanpacker.org. No E in Bridgman, although you'll probably find it if you put the E in. And you can go to our Instagram page. There are lots of little clips on our Instagram page. And thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridgman Packer Dance. Raphael Xavier, please introduce yourself.
I am Raphael Xavier, and I am originally from Wilmington, Delaware, but I live in Philadelphia now. I've been breaking a little over 40 years, and this street dance was something that came and went within a matter of 2 years. So what I do now is I use the vocabulary to create original and imaginative narratives with that form specifically to focus on the maturity of the form because it's associated with the youth. And I always feel like it's important to keep doing that so the audiences can get a perspective of what's possible with this street form.
Coming from a street form, like hip hop and breakdancing that has its own relationship to media, I'm curious, how do you relate to technology? When do you incorporate it in your creative process?
When you think of technology, for me, it's always been this thing of digital, electronic, something outside of what we're actually working with, right? Dance, for example. What I've come to understand technology to be, by definition, is to have access to things that help you and tools that help you reach your goal, right? So I was always one, as a photographer, a filmmaker, a writer, a musician, painter, all of these things I've always kept separate, right? And it wasn't until someone said, you got to stop doing that because you have so many things to pull from in a creative way. So later on, understanding that that's technology, I started to incorporate those things into my work. For example, I know as a breaker, when you watch someone break, you see someone execute their moves, it might last 45 seconds to a minute tops. That's the perspective of the audience watching. Some people would think there's no way you can make an evening length work with a bunch of 45-second solos. So in that time, how do I extend my movement practice over that time? I started bringing in vocal play, like ideas of having to move, stop, catch my breath, pause longer, freeze longer with certain movements. Example, I have a piece I wrote almost 30 years ago now. I had a couple record deals from 94 up to maybe 2020. There's some songs that didn't make the album. Nobody ever heard them. So in the latest show that I'm working with now called Skiff, I use this song and the lyrics go, I think of unthinkable methods to sail the unsinkable. I'm the ancient mariner. This mic is my albatross. Hook, line, and sinker. Baited to catch a thinker. Weighted to be heavier. You should be very afraid. Right? So 30 years later, I make a show where I could use this song and it totally speak to where I am in the moment. And so visually, I play with any ideas I have as a photographer, a visual artist, a filmmaker. Especially now as a filmmaker, I started to work with AI because it's the newest thing that people are playing with. And I was able to create like these visual effects that added to the work. So now utilizing all my skill sets and tools that I have access to, technology-wise, makes my work even more accessible to the audience, or now the audience can relate to what I'm doing outside of dance only.
It fleshes it out. So it is both complementary to what you're doing,
Yeah,
and a selective tool depending on what you need in that moment. It resonates much with what Art and Myrna and Peter were talking about. Like, we always start from a different place and we don't know how we're going to get there, but we know we're going to end up somewhere different.
yeah.
Yeah, and being able to roll with that.
I always tell my students, they always ask me when they get into a move, what do we do now? And I say, wherever you end up is exactly where you're supposed to be. Just get to where you want to go. There's no right or wrong. There's no dead ends. There's no stopping. Just keep moving and you're going to land where you're supposed to be. And just use what you know how to do to move into the next space. And I think that's how I've operated for a long time, but even more so now, it's clear to me it's just a thing.
Especially when you stop compartmentalizing all the different tools that you have.
Yeah.
My name is Hanna Ali. I am a bit different from the rest of the pack. I'm on kind of the more stationary side of performance, where I am a spatial artist. So that's everything from set designs to these sort of immersive spaces that we've been exploring. I'm really big on drama, theatricality, and kind of mixing this idea of function and emotion. So instead of letting my body lead the way, maybe it's that I'm actually creating the space for somebody else to inhabit through my sort of visual storytelling. I've worked with various large artists on their tours, but my original background came from painting. So I kind of wanted to translate the dialogue of looking at a painting into, bringing it into a room with somebody.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I have a background in architecture. So I run an interdisciplinary studio, working mainly on set designs. I guess something that I've learned through architecture is that architecture taught me the permanence and form, but set design really taught me that emotional permanence in a space. And it makes me think about this quote that I would always refer to when I was in school that said something like, architecture is like frozen music. So when you go into a set, I feel like it's a little bit of the opposite. You feel that music and that movement. So it's a nice interplay of like the frozen and what's moving.
Welcome to the dance side. It's been great to have you on this journey with us this year. I would add, particularly from NCCAkron's perspective, as a research and development space for new work in dance, we often, in shorthand, talk about providing artists with time, space, and resources to explore. And particularly with your unique perspective looking at space, that's always been great to hear, like, oh, it's a different thing, because we immediately are going, what will the impact be on the body?
Yeah.
And instead of going to the physicality, you remind us to feel, what feeling does this space evoke? So I'm also curious, how do you relate to technology as a creative tool or a collaborator?
It's so funny because my Instagram bio for a long time used to be, give me some damn space. That as long as you give me the space, I will figure out a way to inhabit it. But for a long time, space is a hard thing to give people, mostly because space can be very expensive. Space to be built, whether it's in architectural forms or even set design, it takes a lot of material. And so I kind of started using technology in forms of rendering. So I would create these 3D imagery processes to show somebody, well, this is what's possible and this is what's possible. And I would go to enough music festivals that at a certain point I would lie to people and tell them I was a stage designer. And because of the renderings, they began to believe it. Then they started hiring me. So it started at a point of finesse, but I really then just like have integrated that form of technology through and through, because I think I've been born at a particular generation that if you do not, then how can you even work on some things? Now I use AI as a part of the process of, again, like showing how can something be made instead of actually as the outcome. I think sometimes things can get a little bit too techy in immersive spaces, like the Van Gogh exhibit, as we were mentioning. And so really being able to retain your artistry as a designer, because I used to think that like designers make money and artists starve. And I had to figure out a way of how to really bring my visions to life. But I was also a vessel for so many performers. So now I'm kind of going back into making installation spaces, which it's really been inspiring to be around the dancers. And also I'm taking movement classes now, and that's been a whole other world.
Once you go dance, you never go back.
Yeah. So I've now started thinking, well, how can my spaces move? And I think even for Natalie, I really brought her into working on projects with me because she has like a background in dance and architecture.
It's kind of been like a full 360, being on both sides of the stage, both behind the scenes and actually on the stage. So, and something in common with like all disciplines, dance, architecture, film, photography, everything that we have in common is light at the end of the day. And how do we talk about those commonalities and differences in light, and how do we illuminate the artistry through that?
Thank you again to our incredible artist teams for sharing your insights and processes with us this evening. We heard from Bridgman Packer about technology being an artistic palette that comes in early in the process. From Raphael, defining technology as any tool that helps achieve a goal, and drawing from photography, filmmaking, writing, music, and even AI to extend and flesh out the dance form. And from Hanna and Natalie, using rendering and technology to build and evoke feeling in space before translating it to a real-life installation. Technology does not necessarily replace art, but can be a tool to help realize an artistic idea. Dance makers have historically incorporated it to help them convey an idea, tell their story, and sometimes even push the art form forward. It is both complementary to what you're doing and a selective tool depending on what you need. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We couldn't do this work without generous support. I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the Ohio Arts Council, the Akron Community Foundation, and the GAR Foundation. Young Arts has been a huge help in enabling us to engage Hanna and her team for this journey, and specifically the National Endowment for the Arts through their Media Arts program made this year's journey possible. And we are so grateful for that support.
Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is produced by NCCAkron and supported in part by the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts, and Audio-Technica, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. This program is produced by Lisa Niedermeyer of Handmade Future Studio. Rahsaan Cruz is our audio engineer, with transcription by Arushi Singh, theme music by Flaco Torres, and cover art by Micah Kraus. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Sarah Durham, Christy Welcher, Nikisha Moore-Dunson, and Dante Fields. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.